Hi, this is Brian Kim. I'm going to share with you case 200 in the best way to do cataract surgery series. This is a 2+ dense lens, and you're going to see that there's some evidence for zonulopathy during cortex removal. And so cortex removal will expose zonulopathy due to the posterior capsule pucker and the rippling that you see when you're pulling on the cortex. And so you're going to see my capsular tension ring technique, in which I'm able to reduce torsional stress on the zonules, and then finally Hydrus microstent placement. So this is the lens. You can see quite a dense lens here. I use a cotton tip to steady the eye, and then use a corneal marker which will help me to center and size the rhexis. I believe this is a left eye. This patient has a little bit of a Bell's reflex. I go ahead and make my paracentesis incision first on the right side, and then the Hydrus microstent incision. You saw that. I always recommend making your incision ahead of time. And why? It's because you can have bleeding, and you don't want to deal with that when you place your stent. Inject intracameral epinephrine and then dispersive viscoelastic to coat the corneal endothelium and flatten the anterior capsule. And this is the triplanar corneal incision. I make a vertical groove, place the blade into the deep part of the groove, tunnel, and then I enter. And these are the sharp tip Haldi Percar forceps. I'm going to puncture the center. You can see there's a beautiful view of that ring that I made on the cornea. On this case, again, this is a huge pupil, so you can see it very clearly in this video. So I'm able to puncture the center, pull down, grabbing the right side of the tear, and then very easily follow that corneal mark that I made here. Again, that corneal mark here will allow me to achieve a well-centered and sized rhexis. Burp some viscoelastic out, and this is the capsulorhexis hydrodissection technique. I place a cannula under the rhexis edge contra-incisionally, pointed tip down, get a nice wave, lift the lens up, and this decompresses the bag. Remember, unless you lift it, you can't be so sure, because you can try to push down on the lens, but in weak zonule cases, all you do is you're just pushing down on the lens and it will not decompress. So that tilting technique is really, really advantageous, and that works all the time without fail. Irrigate the surface of the eye, lifting the incision with a chopper, going in with irrigation off to minimize Descemet's trauma, removing the surface epinuclear material, placing the chopper under the rhexis edge contra-incisionally, pointed tip down. The phaco tip is tilted vertically sub-incisionally, bringing the instruments together and fracturing the lens completely in half. And that is the double chop, placing the chopper around the right heminucleus, hooking the peripheral lens, pulling it centrally toward the phaco tip, and fracturing the lens against the phaco tip, and that is a cross chop maneuver. The cross chop is really advantageous because you're able to essentially fracture the lens from multiple angles, and it all starts with being able to place that chopper around the peripheral lens, hooking the lens, pulling it centrally toward the phaco tip, fracturing the lens in the process, because you're able to fracture the lens against the phaco tip because the phaco tip acts like a chopping block. Grabbing the lens piece with some vacuum, fracturing the lens into smaller pieces, and then emulsifying the lens pieces. Turning that second quadrant in front of me, performing another cross chop maneuver, didn't quite work, doing it again, and now I'm able to fracture that piece. And so that's the thing. Sometimes the angle is awkward, or you might not get around the lens completely, and so you're not able to do it, but then you just try again. It's not a big deal. No harm, no foul. There's nothing bad that happens if you whiff. You know, it's like whiffing on your swing. You know, you swing, you miss. It's okay. You can go back and do it again. Nothing has been hurt. I'm going to turn the second heminucleus in front of me very gently, sliding the chopper around the lens, hooking the peripheral lens, having the phaco tip deep in the bag. But you saw the lens turned, and so it didn't get around the lens. So I'll go ahead and try it again. Like I said, just a few seconds ago. Just try again, and then you're able to achieve a through and through chop. Getting around that third quadrant, again with another cross chop maneuver, fracturing it in half, grabbing that fourth quadrant with some vacuum, and then crushing it in half, and then breaking it up into smaller pieces, and then emulsifying the lens piece. And this is the last quadrant. I'm just lifting that fragment up, crushing the lens with the instruments, and then emulsifying the lens piece. Again, crushing the lens with mechanical forces means you can use less energy. It's like the concept of physics, right? You have different forms of energy. You can use the ultrasonic energy, or you can just use mechanical energy by fracturing it with the instruments. In my opinion, whenever you can use instruments, that's better for the patient, better for the corneal endothelium. So very carefully removing the epinuclear material, keeping the chopper deep, protecting the bag. There's some pieces stuck to the cornea. Getting rid of those pieces. So I take the chopper out, push BSS in, take the phaco tip out, and I go in with the I&E handpiece. I always start subincisionally, peeling from anterior to posterior. This is the cleanest way to peel the cortex. But as I do this, I want you to notice something. As I'm peeling, especially these last pieces, as I'm peeling, look at the tension lines on the posterior capsule as I'm trying to peel the cortex out. Right here, look at those tension lines. We go subincisionally. Again, you can see the tension lines, the puckering of the posterior capsule. Trying to get that subincisional, finally got it. You can see that little sheet of cortex stuck to the posterior capsule. And look how much it's puckering the posterior capsule. Not only that, when you pucker it, it stays puckered. Isn't that interesting? Even though I released the IA from the posterior capsule, it stayed puckered up. Again, that just shows the zonulopathy there. Again, there's more puckering as I'm trying to polish the posterior capsule, but it stays puckered. This means there's reduced peripheral zonular counterforce. Remember, the zonule is supposed to act like springs of a trampoline. It's supposed to keep the posterior capsule taut with peripheral forces. But as I grabbed it with the IA and then let go, it just stayed puckered. So that's a bad sign. I go ahead and push BSS into the subincisional capsule fornix, which was clean. Go ahead and push cohesive viscoelastic to fill the capsular bag. So you can see here, I just left that posterior capsule material because I'm going to put a CTR in. And so you can see this is the CTR. You see there's that long groove there. And so I turn the eyelet, the left eyelet, and I have the injector with the hook pointed down, and I want to align the eyelet with the injector, and it goes right in. That's the key for that. Otherwise, it just kind of flops around, and you can lose the CTR. But if you do it like that, it goes in really easily. Lifting the incision with the Lester hook. I want to get rid of that bubble. It's just bothering me. I don't want it to interfere with anything. So I go in with the cannula and my assistant aspirates that bubble out. I go in with the Lester. As the eyelet's coming out, I grab the leading eyelet, hook it. As I'm advancing it, you can see I'm reducing the peripheral torsional stress because I've hooked the eyelet. Disengage the eyelets off the injector, widen the incision. Again, with these dense lenses, I always put in a 3-piece lens. It's kind of my standard technique. And this is why. You saw this patient has zonulopathy and a dense cataract. They tend to correlate. So why put in a single-piece lens and no CTR, and then the patient's going to come back with a dislocated lens, and you won't have any option except to explant it. At least with this, the 3-piece lens, in my opinion, does provide more peripheral zonular and capsular bag support. And not only that, the CTR provides support as well. I had some OVD come out. And so when you're putting a lens like this in, you want to push more OVD to open the bag, especially because this patient has weak zonules. So push more OVD into the bag. The leading haptic is in the bag, and then I'm dialing the trailing haptic into the bag. So now I'm pushing some cohesive viscoelastic to deep in the chamber and putting some viscoelastic on the cornea, turning the eye away from me. And this is a Hydrus microstent. You want to make sure that stent is actually there in proper position. I turn the eye away, place the gonial lens, making sure I have a good view. You want to see equal amount of cornea and equal amount of iris. I wasn't quite happy with the positioning, so I turned the head some more. And then here we go. Once I'm happy with my view, go ahead and place the Hydrus microstent through my incision. There's not enough viscoelastic, put some more on. And then here we go. You can see the blood coming from Schlem's canal. So go ahead and stab the TM, anterior TM, stabbing slightly upward, flattening out, advancing the Hydrus microstent. It's coming out as it should. Withdraw once you get to the end. Disengage and try to push the notch in a little bit more. Sometimes this step's a little bit tricky. Sometimes the eye doesn't always cooperate as well. So you just do the best you can. And then I turn the eye back and I'm just trying to get another view, making sure the entire Hydrus is in place, which it is. So I'm happy with that. Go ahead and turn the eye straight. Go in with irrigation off, activate irrigation, removing all the viscoelastic from within the bag. Polishing that crap that was on the posterior capsule. Those fine cortical material that I left. Remember, I was getting all that puckering. I didn't really want to mess up with the bag or the zonules. Now that the CTR is in, it's providing that peripheral tautness forces to keep that posterior capsule nice and tight, just like the springs of a trampoline. And then now, because I have that in place, I feel more comfortable and confident to peel all that stuff from the posterior capsule. Again, this is all in polish mode. Again, rather annoying because, you know, you have this lens material, you want to get it out. Of course, you also have some weak zonules, so it's kind of a fine line. Repositing the optic back. Turning the lens a little bit here for a better centration. Sometimes, you know, the capsular bag is not perfectly round. And so I've found that with these lenses, especially the 3-piece, because there is more fornicele support, sometimes you have to rotate the lens to get it better centered. So I'm using the Maltzman because the lens is not really rotating the way I want it. Grabbing the optic haptic junction and rotating it. That's a little bit better. We'll go ahead and remove all the viscoelastic from the anterior chamber, and then I'll hydrate my incisions, and you'll see at the end of the case there's quite a bit of blanching from the Hydrus microstent, which is rather nice. And so again, this is a dense cataract. You saw double chop, cross chop mechanical fracturing forces, and just chipping away and breaking the pieces with mechanical forces. Again, with physics, whenever you have energy, there's different forms of energy. You can use ultrasonic energy to break the lens piece up, or you can use mechanical energy by crushing the lens into smaller pieces with your instruments. And so what's better? Using ultrasonic energy, which can cause more damage to the corneal endothelium, or just crushing forces with your instruments, which doesn't cause any endothelial damage at all. And so at the end, you saw during cortical removal, there was quite a bit of puckering of the posterior capsule. And it was quite a bit, not just a little bit, a lot. And so I made the decision to place a CTR, and the CTR is using the Lester to hook the leading eyelet. So it's able to collapse the CTR. So there's reduced torsional stress on the zonules. And this patient did quite well with the vision as well as the pressure after surgery. I hope this was helpful to you, and I thank you for your attention.